Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. Throughout February, we've been hosting guests telling us about different aspects of learning to code. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're talking to a guest who tried to learn to code, but had it not quite work out. I'm here today with...
I'm Kit Englard, and I am an assistive technology specialist.
That sounds like a really cool title. So we've been looking at people learning to code all throughout the month of February, and I was really excited to bring you on because you wound up not getting into code or not staying with code. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, so I actually started in physics, and I'm considered deafblind. I'm hard of hearing and legally blind. And unfortunately, my vision started to get worse during college, and it was pretty clear I couldn't continue without being able to read Braille. So I left school, and I needed to figure out what to do with my life. I did end up getting a weird degree in creative writing, of all things.
That is a weird degree. Well, not weird by itself, but kind of unexpected from the arc we've got so far.
Yeah, so I've always loved math and science. I didn't get a lot of encouragement as a kid to continue, to pursue it. So that was part of the reason I think I didn't get started sooner. But yeah, I ended up with creative writing because I was running out of grant money for college, and I needed to just finish with something. I couldn't be a partially educated young blind woman with nothing to my name. So I was like, okay, what is the thing I can get the fastest? And my choices were English, history, and creative writing. And I hate English and I hate history. And I'm okay with writing. So I was like, all right, I guess that's what I'm doing.
You'd be like, okay, I've got this many credits. What are we going to do?
Basically, yeah. That's how I got a degree in creative writing. And I ended up getting a concentration in science writing just because of my background.
How unexpectedly cool. So where in that point did you decide you were going to start learning to code or start doing some work with it?
So I had started to lose my hearing, and I was really struggling to try and figure out what to do as a career with my life. And I was really bored and I needed something to do. So I decided to take up coding again. Now, I had started coding as a kid, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but I had taken up coding HTML on Neopets of all things.
I've heard so many people say that.
Yeah, that was my first experience coding.
Pink sparkle background, like a little,
Yep.
Yeah, it's the GeoCities of its day.
Oh my gosh, I was so into coding on Neopets. But I had stopped, and I was like, okay, well, I used to do this, so maybe I can pick it up again and see what I can do with it. So I did, and I was really enjoying it. It was definitely 15 years later, so the code's changed, and there's more CSS, and that wasn't really a thing on Neopets that I could find so much. I did more HTML straight, so that was an interesting change. And I really thought, oh, maybe, I can use this, maybe I can go into a field like this. And I ran into a block, and that was mainly accessibility to material. There's a lot of textbooks out there, and that's great. And there's Khan Academy, which is awesome and has great resources, but it's all audio and it's all visual.
Yeah, so we had a guest on 2 weeks ago who came to talk to us about learning to code while blind. And the visual stuff they talked about too. Parham said again and again, you'd get fantastic documentation, you'd be listening along, and all of a sudden you'd get sort of a black box of an image right in the middle of nowhere.
Yes. Yeah, it's like that, except if you add in the audio problem, I can't understand a lot of tutorials. If it's not very clear audio and it's a man, I really don't understand very well because I have low frequency hearing loss. So... And as we know, most people in the tech field are men.
I think that's a point I had never stopped to think about. And I think that's really valuable in developing accessible programs, is to get out there and chat about what people with a range of needs need.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found out pretty quickly that coding was probably not going to be for me immediately. But it was an interesting side route, because it got me more interested in tech. And it was really what sort of was the bridge between my physics background, physics and math, and transitioning to technology. Because I've always been a bit of a technophobe. And coding helped me understand what was happening in the background. And I was able to understand what my screen reader was doing, what my Braille display was seeing. And that also combined with my creative writing, I was able to sort of start doing tech journalism. And I just grew from there and eventually went into AT.
So this is really interesting. We've been chatting for about 2-3 minutes, and we've had several huge, exciting, highly skilled jumps. I'm going to go ahead and put the start of this way back for Neopets. From Neopets to having a challenging time with uni because of the materials, to physics and creative writing, and then coding, and now, assistive technology expertise via being a journalist.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. I actually applied to my job on a fluke. I had been on 26 interviews and I kept getting no. Actually, I was hired once and then fired once a manager found out I was deafblind.
Wow.
So I was pretty depressed.
Wow.
I was so depressed. It was bad. It was so bad. And I was so depressed. And the NFB sent out this email saying this company in New Jersey is looking for an assistive technology specialist. And I was like, ugh, I don't know anything about assistive technology, but I'm so desperate. I just need a job, so I'll apply. And it was the easiest interview I had ever had in my entire life. And they were just asking me about screen readers and Braille displays and so many other tech about iOS and about PC and Windows machines. And I was even able to expand and talk about the Xbox and using narrator on the Xbox.
Cool.
And I was like, wait, when did I learn this? I kept joking and telling my friends, oh, I'm not doing anything. I'm watching Netflix all the time. But I wasn't.
You were
actually.
investigating the accessibility tools of Netflix and other common... You've already got the job, so I don't have to try and sell it.
Yeah, it was just funny because I'm really down on myself a lot. So I was like, oh, I'm too stupid to be able to go in technology. Like, I'm not smart enough. But nope, as it turns out, I actually am very good at my job.
Oh, I was about to politely berate you and be like, no, it sounds like but it seems like you've come to understand that you're fantastic.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so dumb. I can't figure this out. And I'm like, wait, no, it's okay. Like, I don't have to be amazing at every little thing.
So when you found that you were talking to people about what you were doing, what's usually the reception to, I'm a specialist in assistive technologies?
Well, normally people don't know what that is. So I usually define it as I teach people who are blind and visually impaired how to use computers and other stuff is usually how I explain it to people. And then they're usually really interested because most people don't even realize that someone who's blind or deafblind can even use a phone or use especially a phone. People are like, deafblind people can use phones? Yes. And then I have to explain the whole range of hearing devices that are available that connect to different things. People get confused. It's very funny.
So the audience, our dear listener today, statistically speaking, is someone working in technology or someone looking to get into technology. If you had one thing where you were like, hey, please stop doing this or please start doing that, what would you politely ask people do with their products?
To make everything you create accessible. Because it's so sad to me when I'm working with a client and they're talking to me and they're very dejected because they're like, my company just switched to a program that doesn't work with my screen reader anymore. What do I do?
Oh, wow, that's deadly serious. So it's not just things that we'd like to think we can give people access to. It's not just things like, oh, I can't watch TV on Netflix. I'm cut out of massive amounts of media.
No.
But also, we've changed this and I can't do my job.
Oh, it's very serious. I know people who work in education who can't access the grade books at their schools. There's financial advisors who can't access financial software. There's so many tech issues. And it's so frustrating because I know personally I was looking for a job doing social media management. And I actually got turned over several times, or looked over, I guess, because I didn't have the ability to use the software. And they didn't want to take the time to find software that was accessible.
Is there a specific software that a lot of folks were asking for in the social media space that just wasn't accessible?
I really don't remember what it was anymore. I really wish I could remember.
No worries at all.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I really don't remember what the software was. I probably just blocked it out of my mind because I was pretty depressed at the time. So
you'd be like, I never want to hear this again.
Yeah, basically.
You've talked a bit about what kind of advice you'd be interested in giving sort of the people out there making technology for sort of mass consumption, social media tooling. I keep coming back to Netflix because I'm a bit outraged. But what kind of things would have really made a difference for you in your education, in staying in physics, or in sort of being able to learn to code or stay coding? If you could design a perfect educational product or a perfect piece of tooling, what would make your life in technology much easier?
I don't think there's any one thing that would help. It's a series of issues. There's a lack of education among teachers of the visually impaired, or TVIs, in teaching Nemeth code, which is the math Braille code. There are very few teachers out there who are capable of teaching up through being able to use calculus. There's a difference between being able to teach, say, Nemeth for Algebra 1 or pre-algebra, and again, getting kids and young adults up to pre-calculus, calculus, vector calculus requires very different knowledge levels. So that's one problem and one barrier. Another is just, again, lack of materials, physical materials being translated into Braille. Unfortunately, something like a refreshable Braille display does not do a great job with math books because, of course, you lose all of the visual information, like graphs and things.
That's really valuable to know and frustrating.
Yeah, and there are talking graphing calculators. Personally, this sounds hilarious, but I'm a visual learner, so I need tactile graphs or I don't understand the material. That's definitely a problem. Inaccessibility in learning software is a problem. I see a lot of schools transitioning to books and things that are online that for some reason screen readers can't look at.
Wow, there's got to be some level of duty to care in there on evaluating sort of online textbooks and evaluating learning material. That's incredibly frustrating.
Oh yeah, it's super frustrating. That's why I can't say like there's any one thing. It's sort of like multiple systemic problems. But you also, of course, say you have a later in life learner who wants to learn code, making some sort of learning accessible, like a Khan Academy, making that more accessible because it relies pretty heavily on graphics. And I was able to get through it for a while, but my computer screen was not big enough because I have to make things so big. I wasn't able to enlarge enough. I'm hoping to get a new computer soon with a bigger display. So hopefully I'll be able to go back to coding once I have that, but we'll see.
That'd be really exciting. I'd really love to come back and have another chat in 6 months or in a year to see how things are going. No pressure.
Well, that's my goal. I do want to get more into, I do want to move. I want to learn more about development. I find it very interesting.
So I think for some of our sighted listeners, some of the tooling and some of the different ways of learning may be very unfamiliar to them. So talking about Nemeth, a Braille, it sounds like a Braille coding system for maths?
Yes. There are several Braille codes.
Fantastic. Tell me all, well, if you don't mind, tell me all about them. Tell us all about them.
So there's the Old English Braille code, which is not Old English, but it's the former English Braille code. There is Nemeth, which is the math Braille code. There is Music Braille, and there's something called Computer Braille. And Computer Braille is what you use if you're doing computer coding, I think. I haven't used it because my Braille skills are much better, but I haven't quite moved on to using Computer Braille heavily.
And I think that's something that a lot of listeners may be very unfamiliar for us. The idea that not all visually impaired people use or interact with or read Braille may be a bit shocking to folks.
Yeah, a lot of coders I've talked to who are blind actually do things completely auditorily.
Yeah, we had a guest on just 2 weeks ago who came on to tell us about how they work with screen readers. So this is really interesting to have another perspective looking at the different ways people learn and work.
So these 4 codes, and there's a new code out called Unified English Braille, which was an attempt to simplify all of the English codes because there was American English Braille, there was British English Braille, there was Australian Braille. I think there might have been another code for South Africa, but I'm not sure. And the Braille authorities, or BANA, the Braille Authority of North America, decided this was ridiculous and merged things together so everything's unified English Braille. And it also took some elements of computer Braille and absorbed it in to handle things like Twitter is now a thing. So the @ symbol.
Oh, that's very exciting. And when did this happen? That sounds very recent.
I don't know when the exact change went about. maybe 5 or 6 years ago, because I had to actually relearn the code. And sometimes you'll get something that's in the old English system, and sometimes you'll get something that's in the current code. So that's a little annoying because you keep having to go back and forth.
It's a little bit like the XKCD comic strip, somebody coming in and saying, hey, we've got 16 different competing standards. What do we do? Let's build a new one.
Yep, exactly.
So it sounds like the gate to jump to get in to learn these things is rather high. You come in, if you're a later in life learner, you have to learn Braille. Oh, surprise, there's a new standard, also this one. Whether or not working with auditory tools works best, it sounds like a lot of extra overhead.
Oh, it definitely is. There's a lot of lots of extra stuff, which is again why I left physics originally, because as a very visual learner, I wasn't able to grasp the concepts auditorily. That's not to say another blind person can't, because somebody else might be a very good auditory learner. I am not.
And I think that's a really valuable point as well. When you're working to build learning experiences, or you're working to build products, or you're working to build online communities, it's not just about here's something that will work for blind people, or here's something that's going to work for people who are hard of hearing or deaf. It's about let's build experiences that let a range of people with diverse perspectives with a range of different needs, not just technically this will work for blind folks.
Exactly. And even in the deafblind community, in fact, I think the deafblind community is one of the most diverse communities I've ever met, because you have people who are completely deaf, but are maybe low vision. So maybe they have 20/60, 20/70 vision. And you have people who are totally blind with mild hearing loss. Those are completely different needs. So in the deafblind community, you can't say this is made for deafblind people, because trying to accommodate both of those ends of the spectrum and everybody in between, all the way to people who are completely deaf and completely blind, that's just incredible. The deafblind community is just a really incredible community.
So if you were chatting tomorrow to someone maybe from the deafblind community, or someone from a different community with special needs interested in getting into technology, what kind of advice would you give them? Or I guess, what kind of advice would you give yourself a couple of years back?
I would say find somebody in the field and talk to them. It's going to feel like you're the only person in the whole world trying to do what you're doing, and you're not. There are other people doing this. There are a lot of other people doing these things. Trying to network is important, because that's how an able-bodied person's doing it too. They're networking. They're talking to their professors. Their professors are giving them advice how to handle this problem and that problem. And you need the same thing. It's just the problems you're going to encounter are going to be different. So you should find somebody who has experienced those issues and can help you problem solve exactly the way your peers are doing.
Where would someone start looking?
That is a really good question. I know the National Federation for the Blind has a Career Connect program. I have made an effort to connect people with disabilities to people in the field with disabilities, so students out in the field, on my work on my own blog.
Would it be possible to tell our listener what your blog is, where they can find you online?
Yeah, it's called Femme de Chem. So it's like the French word femme, FEMME. DECHEM.
I am a massive nerd for cute domain names, and I'm just sitting quietly jealous. And you mentioned that it's gotten a lot easier to access Twitter these days. Is there some place on Twitter that people can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, but actually I would also say Twitter is an excellent place to network.
Okay.
I have found Twitter to be amazingly beneficial for professional reasons. In fact, I tell people don't bother getting on Twitter unless it's for professional reasons, because if you go on Twitter for personal reasons, you're going to get stuck in some of the weird pockets of Twitter that you probably don't want to be in.
Yeah, Twitter's it's just big enough where it's got very specific rabbit holes you can fall down for years and years.
Oh, yeah. But if you sort of focus your Twitter followers and things like that and who you're following, you can develop a very nice network of people. And I've been really shocked by how I've been able to use that network and get to know people in the field with disabilities. And it's really helped me personally to feel like, oh, maybe someday I can do that too. When before I really didn't think I could accomplish it. Like, I didn't think I could major in physics. I didn't think I could continue in mathematics. But it's not true. There are people out there doing it. And it's just awesome. So Twitter's great. I highly recommend Twitter. It's also bizarrely accessible.
Bizarrely accessible. I've got a friend or two working at Twitter. I'm going to go ahead and pass that feedback along as, hey, good job, y'all. You're bizarrely accessible.
It's so weird. Facebook is the worst. Like, actually the worst. In fact, it has never really been accessible since I started using it back in 2007. All of my blind friends, every single one of them, use either the Facebook app, which is not very good either, or the mobile Facebook site.
Whoa.
Nobody uses the full site.
Sighted folks as well, I think, are generally gently frustrated with the mobile site. So it really sucks that there's a lot of folks who have special needs around accessibility who are kind of being shunted off on this second tier version.
I don't know what's up with Facebook. They're a weird company, but Twitter's great.
I love how we got to be a little bit grumpy and be like, hey, Twitter, sorry. Hey, Facebook, sort yourself out, but Twitter, good job, gold star. So you've given some really fantastic advice for somebody who's got some accessibility needs, who might want to get into tech. Come on in, maybe get on Twitter, network, find someone else who's done what you want to do. What kind of advice would you give sort of anyone out there who's tried to learn to code and it just hasn't worked out for some reason?
I think it's like anything else. When you have your heart set on something and you're absolutely sure this is what you want to do, and it turns out it's not for you. I personally think the hardest day of my life was the day I turned in my form to unenroll from my university and decide not to keep continuing in physics. I really had no idea what I was going to do because I was so certain I wanted to be a research physicist, and that's what I wanted. And it's not the end. There's no skill that's useless. All skills are useful. So even if you don't continue in coding, you can think about other skills that you have and see if what you've learned from coding can be applied to another area. And I bet the answer is yes.
So that's really interesting. So don't see this as you've tried and you failed, but look at the skills you've developed. Look at everything you've learned along the way and see whether or not you want to be a tech journalist or an assistive technology expert or a creative writer.
There are so many fields that require technology things. In fact, I would say every field at this point requires some level of technology knowledge. Whatever field you're going into, the knowledge that you bring in from coding will probably be useful to you.
This is a fantastic point to go ahead and close out on. Kit, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Pursuit Podcast. If you come back next Tuesday, you're going to hear from guest Jen Schiffer talking about glitch and the role of creativity in learning to code. We hope to see you then.